When I first stumbled into the world of indie publishing, I thought I was stepping into a creative sanctuary, a place where the misfits, the dreamers, and the voices too bold for traditional publishing could finally thrive. Indie publishing was supposed to be a space where innovation flourished, where authors could break free of rigid genre expectations, write stories that didn't fit neatly into a marketable category. But after years of making YouTube videos about writing, and my more recent deep dives into publishing, and spending way too much time researching the indie world, which is the understatement of the year, which is where this video comes from, I came to a sobering realization. The more I dig, the clearer it became. Indie publishing isn't the scrappy, rebellious underdog I once thought it was, or it should be. If anything, it's starting to look a lot like traditional publishing, and not in a good way. This video is based on over 2 years of research, hard work, talking to people. This video is not an opinion piece. This has come from the inside. It all started with curiosity. I wanted to understand how the indie publishing world was evolving, so I did what any mildly obsessed person does. I went down a rabbit hole. I told myself I was just doing a little research to stay informed for my YouTube videos. But a little research turned into a deep dive that lasted weeks. I talked to indie writers, joined forums, scrolled through endless Twitter threads from anonymous accounts, and lurked in Facebook groups where authors vented about their experiences. I watched videos from indie authors sharing their publishing journeys, some genuinely inspiring and others far less so. I didn't want to... I didn't just want surface level knowledge, I wanted to understand what it's really like to be an indie author today, so I asked questions, lots of them. I asked about marketing strategies, sales numbers, how authors decide on what to write next. I asked about burnout, jealousy, and the emotional toll of trying to make a living as an indie author, and the answers I got? Eye-opening. I expected indie publishing to be a wild frontier where authors took risks, where creativity topped market trends, where you could carve out a niche for your weird, brilliant story even if it didn't fit neatly into a genre box. But the deeper I went, the more I realised that indie publishing has quietly morphed into something that looks suspiciously like the system it was supposed to break away from. And I will say some of those conversations were genuinely quite depressing. One of the biggest draws of indie publishing is the supposed lack of gatekeepers. No agents, no editors telling you your book just doesn't fit the market. No middlemen deciding whether your story is worth telling. You write a book, you publish the book. Simple? Right? Not exactly. Gatekeeping doesn't disappear, it just changes form. Now the gatekeepers are the algorithms, the trends, and the community itself. If your book doesn't fit to what's currently selling, if it's too weird, too niche, too risky, good luck getting traction. If it's remotely controversial, good luck with the dog pile. The indie space might not have to be a publishing house turning your work away, but the invisible hands of Amazon algorithm quietly burying your books under a pile of enemies to lovers, romance, fantasy, and cozy murder mysteries with quirky female leads. And even within the indie community, there's a very weird sense to it. Certain authors and genres get boosted, while others are barely registered. The ones that fit the mold, the ones who play the game and produce what's trending get the most visibility. Those who don't get left fighting for scraps. I spoke to indie authors who poured their hearts into books that didn't quite fit the mold. Literary fiction, good luck. Experimental genres, good luck. Forget it. Even stories that blended genres in interesting ways struggle to find traction because they don't align with the neat little boxes that the algorithm and the community prefer. So while it's true that indie publishing doesn't have official gatekeepers anymore, the system has just been replaced with a different one. Ones that are harder to see, but probably just as unforgiving. Indie publishing sells itself on the promise of creative freedom. And to some extent, that's true. You can write whatever you want, but if you actually want people to read it, that's a different story. What's thriving in indie spaces right now isn't boundary-pushing, genre-bending works. It's safe, it's marketable, and familiar. Books that follow trends, that feed into the same formulas that dominate traditional publishing. I've lost count of how many dark, romantasy novels with morally grey love interests I've seen, each one indistinguishable from the last. Indie authors mostly aren't writing what they love, they write what sells, and can you blame them? And seriously, can you blame them? When you are competing against thousands of other books where discoverability is a nightmare and the algorithm rewards conformity, playing it safe isn't just an option for a lot of people, it's a survival tactic. I spoke to indie authors who admitted off the record that they started tailoring their books to what's trending because they couldn't afford not to. They, they weren't passionate about the stories they were writing, but they knew these stories would sell. One writer basically told me, to quote, I'm basically writing fan fiction of what's already popular. Because if I don't make the rent. Creative freedom, sure, but only if you're willing to risk obscurity. Another thing I didn't expect was the social politics. I used to think indie publishing was a meritocracy. Write a great book, market it well, and you'll find your audience, but it's not that simple. Success in the indie world often feels like a popularity contest. Who you know, who shouts out your book, and how well you can network can make or break your career. I've watched authors with genuinely brilliant work struggle to get noticed, while others with mediocre, trend-driven books skyrocket because they know how to play the social game. And the community, it's not as supportive as it likes to pretend to be. Behind the scenes, there is an amazing amount of envy, bitterness, and backbiting. Everyone smiles on the surface, but scratch a little deeper, you'll find a whole lot of resentment. One author I spoke to put it bluntly, if you don't have the right people hyping your book, it doesn't matter how good it is, you're invisible. And that's the ugly truth. Indie publishing just isn't about writing a book, it's about who you know, how well you network, and whether you're part of the right circles. And most people are not. So, I hate to bring this back to book talk, but let's go. So let's talk about it. Love it or hate it, it's had a massive impact on both traditional and indie publishing. While it's great that some authors have found success through viral recommendations, the downside is it creates a feedback loop of what type of books keep getting pushed. In indie spaces, that means if you're not willing to write something that fits into a current trend, whether it's spicy romantasy or morally grey villains, you're fighting an uphill battle. It's hard not to notice how much indie fiction feels like I'm trying to think of a good word for it. How much of indie fiction feels like it's been reverse engineered to appeal to book talk sensibilities. High stakes romance, angsty portrayals, enough tropes to fill a bingo card. I spoke to multiple indie authors who admitted they've adjusted their writing and plot lines to cater to book talk trends, knowing that a viral recommendation can change their entire career. One even said, if I don't put a love triangle in my books, I'm leaving money on the table. What's being rewarded in the indie spaces isn't innovation or originality, it's trend chasing. And the result is a flood of books that feel like they were designed in a lab to tick all the right boxes for a viral post. Another thing that doesn't get talked about enough, burnout. Indie authors are constantly under pressure to produce more books. Faster, to stay there, to stay in the current. If you're not releasing a new book as quickly as possible, you're losing momentum. Disappearing from the algorithm and watching your hard-earned audience drift away. The audience are fickle. They want more, and if you're not delivering it quickly as possible, they will just drift away to another writer. I've spoken to authors who are trapped in the cycle of rapid release schedules, churning out book after book just to keep their heads above water. The emotional toll is staggering. These authors aren't just writing, they're marketing, managing social media accounts, running ads, handling customer service, and navigating the ever-changing landscapes of the internet. One author described it as being on a treadmill that never stops, and if you slow down, you fall off. After all the research, after all those conversations and late night scrolling, I'm left with a lot of mixed feelings. I still believe indie publishing is probably the future, and there are authors out there doing amazing, innovative, boundary pushing works, but they're swimming against the current in a system that rewards sameness and punishes risk. And honestly, as someone who has been trying to publish and build up the courage to do it, I'm tired of the game. I'm tired of the noise. I'm tired of pretending that indie publishing is a utopia it once was. I didn't get into writing to chase trends or play politics. I got into it because I had stories I wanted to tell, even if they weren't market worthy. Although I will probably never tell those stories. Maybe that makes me naive, or maybe I'm just means I'm ready to step back and stop worrying about fitting into a mould and focus on telling the stories I care about, regardless of whether they go viral. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather write something that matters than churn out another piece of BookTok approved slop. And does that mean going it alone? Possibly. Does it mean no support? Possibly. Does it mean that I'll probably never publish anything? Possibly. But always remember that what's happening on the outside is very different to what's happening on the inside in any community, space online, or any movement.